Keir Starmer.
Excellent.
Thank you, Sir David. I, like many others here, welcome this debate, and it's a good thing that 600,000 or so members of the public, one way or the other, have brought this to the attention of the House. There are clearly a wide range of views amongst the public, across all the political parties and across the House itself, and there have been powerful speeches and powerful interventions. But in one important aspect, I think in all of the speeches this afternoon, we are united in condemning the comments of Donald Trump on issues such as Mexican immigrants, Muslims and women. And we should celebrate that, whatever view we take of the proposals in the petitions before us. And I'd like to take this opportunity to add my name to the list of those condemning the comments that have been made. Before turning to the specific question of whether Donald Trump should be banned from entry to the UK, I wanted just to spend a few moments on a wider context, because Donald Trump made his comments about Muslims largely in the aftermath of the San Bernardino shootings on the 2nd of December. That's when he was at his height in relation to those comments. Now, he's not the first, and he won't be the last, to make comments about a community in the wake of a terrorist atrocity. And that gives us the opportunity, I think, this afternoon, just to be absolutely clear that responsibility for terrorist acts lie with terrorists, not with the communities that they purport to come from. And we must be clear what we say about that, even where he is not clear about what he says. And that does give me the opportunity to bring to this debate concern about the rise in hate crime here in the UK. Hate crime has been increasing, as has been mentioned in this debate. It's gone up 18% in 2015. And the number of offences involving religious hatred has more than doubled over the past 3 years. That rise is a concern, but it's not uniform. It always spikes after an atrocity. There's always a reaction in terms of hate crime. And just last month, in my constituency of Holborn and St Pancras, I had convened a meeting with Bengali and Somali women that I was particularly concerned to hear from. And we spent the afternoon discussing their concerns. And this was in December, after the Paris atrocities. And the one thing they raised with me over and over again was that they, the women in my constituency, Muslim women in my constituency, were very concerned that they were being insulted that day, that week, as a result of what had happened in Paris. And they perceived it and they felt it. And they said it was happening in Euston, on the buses, on the trains, when they were shopping, etc. That is happening in our communities, and it does spike after atrocities. And we have to unite about our values and our concern that that should be dealt with. Now, I know that the government is now tracking Muslim hate crime as an independent category, and that's welcome. And I know there are a number of steps being taken to deal with hate crime. And anything the Minister can say to point out what in addition is being done to tackle this kind of hate crime, I think would be welcome. But I do join with other comments when saying that I too, and many people here, will want to send a message to the Muslim community about how much we value them and what they bring to our societies. Of course.
Yeah.
There's been our question.
On that point, and I'm extremely grateful to Honourable Member for giving way and the sentiments he makes in terms of talking about the Muslim community. Can I also say to Honourable Member, and I think it's important to put on record, that the Muslim community condemns all type of bigotry, racism, regardless of who is spouting that. There seems to be a misconception, not least that's happened throughout this debate, and I refer to comments that I've received during it, that for some reason we think it's acceptable for Muslims to speak in derogatory terms about people of other religions. I think it's very important that we put on record that that is absolutely not the case. Wherever the bigotry, racism, hate speech is coming from, it is not acceptable, regardless of who might be delivering the message.
Well, I'm very grateful for that intervention, because I do want to just say a few comments about part of the debate this afternoon about this simplistic approach that says, well, because he wants to ban Muslims, we shouldn't ban him. It is far too simplistic. What lies at the heart of his belief that Muslims should be banned is that he thinks they're all dangerous. That's not buffoonery. That is absolutely repugnant. That is not what leads anybody in this debate, anybody who signed that petition, to suggest that Donald Trump shouldn't come here. It's a very different situation, and that is why his comments are so offensive to that whole community, and of course to women and to Mexicans as well. It's because of the assumptions and the belief that lies behind them. They are, of course.
I don't in any way condone what Donald Trump said, but I don't think it's right in fair dealing to say that if you ban all of X, that means you think that all of X are dangerous, all of whatever group it might be. What you're saying, forgive me, but what you're saying is that a very few from a certain group might be dangerous. And that's where the ban is coming from. I don't condone the logic. I don't condone the policy. But I think in this House of Commons, we have to give fair dealing to the views that have been expressed.
I'm grateful for that intervention. I think we have to be very careful about equating the views of people in this House, members of this House, who call for a ban, and the views of Donald Trump. And I'm afraid, for my part, they do edge towards treating a whole community as a suspect community. It may be, of course, that he doesn't think each and every member of the community, but this has happened before in history, many other contexts, where a whole community has been treated as a suspect community, and we've stood against it in the past, and we should stand against it now. Now, one of the measures, of course, yes, of course.
Christie.
Giving way, and he comes to this debate with considerable learned and legal experience. Isn't this debate can be tied up in whether Mr. Trump's comments were, as have been described, outrageous comments, or simply, as some of us believe, hate speech? And as his colleague from Birmingham pointed out, there are others who have been banned from this country for saying exactly the same things.
I'm grateful for that intervention. I will come to that, if I may, in just a moment. I am going to deal with that specific issue. Obviously, one of the measures available to the government is to ban any individual for entry to the UK, and that is a power that's been used by successive Home Secretaries on a number of occasions, and many of the examples have been put before the House this afternoon. It is a power that should be applied equally to everybody, whatever their wealth or power, and I think that is important. And I don't hold the view that because someone is a presidential candidate, that gives them any special category. They should be judged in the same way as everybody else on the basis of what they've actually said or done. Of course.
Sarah Woods.
Does the honourable gentleman agree, however, that the consequences of this kind of hate speech are greater when they come from high-profile individuals? And as I say, the heart of this debate is whether or not Donald Trump's presence in the UK is conducive to the public good. And we've heard repeatedly about the kind of harms, in fact, the honourable gentleman himself has elucidated the kind of hate crimes that we're talking about here.
I'm grateful for that intervention, and I do accept the substance of it, that certain words in the mouths of certain individuals are more likely to provoke a reaction. The question is, what's the test for a ban, and whether it has to be linked to public disorder and violence rather than simply offensive. I will come to that, but I do accept the premise that different people will provoke different reactions, sometimes according to who they are. The more simple point I'm making, or the narrower point, is that simply because he has particular wealth or power or particular position shouldn't affect the application of the same rules to him as they'd be applied to anybody else. But the threshold for banning is relatively high, and the power is relatively rarely used. The test, of course, is whether an individual would be their exclusion from the UK would be conducive to the public good. And in 2005, as has already been mentioned, that was extended to unacceptable behaviours, and that was spelt out. And it is worth just going through the way in which those behaviours were set out as a list of indicative factors in 2005. And there were 4 examples: fomenting, justifying or glorifying terrorist violence in furtherance of particular beliefs, seeking to provoke others to terrorist acts, fomenting other serious criminal activity, or fostering hatred which might lead to intercommunity violence in the UK. So the touchstone has always been words which provoke a response which has an element of disorder or violence in it. And so it is quite a high threshold. And examples have been given of some of the cases that have fallen under those provisions. They were given at the outset of the debate we've had. Now, there's no doubt, I think, that some of Donald Trump's comments have been offensive, shocking and disturbing. And I join with those that say they're not funny. They are repugnant. But they are just that, offensive, shocking and disturbing. And I don't think that in and of itself is enough to provoke a ban at this stage on the basis of what's been said so far. And I do go back to a principle that was set out by the European Court of Human Rights almost a quarter of a century ago in relation to a case where the Sunday Times and our government were slugging it out over Spycatcher. And the European Court said this: freedom of expression constitutes one of the essential foundations of a democratic society. It's applicable not only to information or ideas that are favourably received or regarded as inoffensive, but as a matter of indifference, but also to those that offend, shock or disturb. And the point the court was making is a really important one. Freedom of speech is not needed for speech which is welcome. You don't need a protection for speech which people treat with indifference. It is only relevant, it only bites when you get into the sphere of offensive speech, of shocking speech and disturbing speech. That is the whole point of the protection of free speech. And in this context, therefore, this speech, however offensive, shocking or disturbing, is in fact protected speech under what we conceive to be freedom of expression. Now, how does that translate? Well, of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner to express his views. I do agree with others that we should invite him to join us in our various constituencies and meet our constituents and members of various religious orders and faiths and communities. Actually, listening this afternoon, if he came here, he's obviously going to be really busy because he's going to several constituencies already. I would obviously invite him to mine, that's the end of a long list, to meet members of my constituency, because it is an incredibly diverse, multicultural community. And Donald Trump would see a UK very different to the picture that he painted. But should he be banned from entering the country on the basis of what he said? No, in my view, he shouldn't. He should be met with words far more powerful than his own. I do accept that this is a judgment call, and I respect those, not only this afternoon but on other occasions, who have expressed the contrary view, that this is so close to the line that Donald Trump should in fact have action taken against him. But in the end, we should be guided by our own values and not those of Donald Trump. And our own values include a deep belief in freedom of speech and a deep belief in multi-faith and diverse societies where everyone feels secure and everyone feels respected. Thank you, Sir David.